cost shelter going in America today. Cost should range from $50 to $500 for a shelter that will take you through fire, high winds, 200-mile-an-hour winds, radiation, and just about anything, in fact, except flood. It will take you through earthquake too, we believe. The cost depends upon how many salvage materials you use and how much material you use off your own land. Of course, the primary building material is earth. You're snuggled into the earth, which is how we keep the costs so low. If you're going to buy all new lumber and so forth, it'll probably run you $500 or so. But if you can work up the materials on your own land, the posts and beams on your own land, and get some low-cost lumber, old barn wood or something, you'll be able to do this literally for as low as $50, as I did with my $50 underground house. We're going to teach you a number of other things also. Among them, what to do with your shelter when you're not using it for a shelter. It can be used as a spare bunk room, storage room. It can be used as a root cellar. We'll try to get to what you can do with a shelter after the time of need. If you're like many of us, you believe that a time of cataclysm is coming, a time of earth purification, and we're going to need some heavy-duty sheltering. This is not an alarmist concept. People had shelters in the Midwest for 100 years. Everybody had their little tornado shelter. Now they're living in trailer houses without shelters. I would say that the people before were living more sensibly than the people are living today. And if you build a shelter, don't feel as though you're doing something kooky, because mankind has done this throughout the ages. It's only in recent years that mankind believes that society, the government or something, can get him through whatever's coming. It won't be able to, not for long. Fallout sheltering had some vogue in the 50s in the United States and the early 60s. And that's how many of us who are designing underground now got the inspiration for going underground. I know Malcolm Wells was one. There are several others in the East that went through the same process that I did. I started thinking, well, if people are going to build fallout shelters, why not build a house that is also a fallout shelter? And we started, of course, thinking of underground structuring. Somewhere along the line, probably because of the Physicians for Nuclear Responsibility out of Boston, Massachusetts, and Dr. Ellen Caldicott, somewhere along the line, the notion became prevalent that you simply could not survive nuclear war. This is clearly incorrect. The people who were saying that were going so far as saying that a nuclear war would destroy all of life on Earth. And I struggled for the last couple of nights trying to find a concise way of refuting this and giving some idea of what's coming and why you should have a shelter. And then last night I remembered several years ago I wrote a chapter in a book which should be forthcoming hopefully in the winter of 92, 93, called Earth Cure, which I spent 5 years of my life writing. And I think probably the most concise way that I can give you some idea of what's coming and the practicality of underground sheltering is to go ahead and simply read an excerpt from that chapter. The Soviet Union, when they were in existence and were our enemies, targeted for their number 2 target in the United States, just behind ICBM silos, SAC bases and such, was America's electrical generating plants. The Russians knew that if American society was deprived of electricity, it would cease to function, which is right. It will cease to function for a good while. This illustrates the vulnerability of industrialized civilization to disruption. It illustrates the total dependency of city dwellers upon a smoothly functioning society. Any minor disturbance to the social order, such as a bus and railway workers' strike or a garbage workers' walkout, leads to disorder. A truckers' strike leads to barely subdued panic. Interruption of basic services, such as a New York City electrical blackout, results in chaos. What will happen when there is a major and simultaneous disruption of many services? City people must be supplied with water, food, cooking fuel, housing, heating, lighting, clothing, and transportation. They rely on others for garbage and sewage services, medical services, police and fire protection, jobs, and insurance or social programs to cushion them during unemployment or illness. They rely on society for just about everything, in fact, except air and sex, and with smog and the increase in potency, even those are in question. America is exceedingly vulnerable. Any number of things may knock society out of whack. Atomic attack, nuclear meltdown, invasion, sabotage, terrorism, revolution, riots, panics, shortages, massive labor strikes, runaway inflation, rampant depression, or total economic collapse. Natural threats include volcanic activity, earthquakes, pole shifts, climatic changes, tidal waves, fire, drought, extreme cold, extreme heat, heavy rains, floods, extreme winds, tornadoes, and hurricanes, and collision with comets and meteorites. If these things happen, or perhaps I should say when these things happen, to any intense degree, civilization as we know it will stop abruptly. The citizenry will be helpless. Many may think that they can jump into their family car and make it out to the country somewhere and survive, but this is an illusion. They will find that the river they had hoped to drink from is a poisonous chemical froth. The wild game they counted on is quickly exhausted. Nor can they rely on the farmers, who will have no water themselves because their pumps are without electricity too. The farmers will not be raising crops because there will be no more gasoline for their tractors. Since these monocropping and agribusinessmen no longer have farms balanced with chickens, hogs, milking cows, and row crops, they will have little in the way of food for their own families, much less for the 97% of the Americans who live in cities. Agribusiness families themselves buy food off the supermarket shelves. They're as tied up to the system as anybody. Were the population suddenly evenly distributed among the farms, each farming family of 4 would be burdened with 135 refugees. Now, could they handle these even in the best times, much less in times of catastrophe and chaos? I can think of no historical precedent when so many are so incapable of taking care of themselves. During the last great social disruption in the United States, the Great Depression of the 30s, many went back to the family farm where they were able to work for their keep. Many Depression-era farmers were still relatively self-reliant. They plowed with horses, grew most of their own food, pumped and hauled their own water, built their own houses, cut their own firewood, and illuminated with lamps. The spring house was a refrigerator. They made much of their own clothing, relied mostly on a healthy lifestyle and herbs to avoid medical attention, had a shotgun and dogs for protection, walked or rode horses, threw their garbage to the hogs, used an outhouse, made a continuous living off their own piece of land, and in tough times had neighbors, kin, and churches to fall back on. And it can be argued that they were considerably happier than we are today. The nuclear doomies will try to convince you that mankind will be all wiped out in a nuclear exchange. But that's not true. Informed estimates are that perhaps 5% of the Earth's population would die from an all-out nuclear war. The National Academy of Sciences made such an estimate in 1975. It was prepared by 8 of its own members, assisted by 48 other experts in the effects of nuclear explosions and related phenomenon. Titled Long-Term Worldwide Effects of Multiple Nuclear Weapons Detonations, it suggests that if half of all the nukes in the world's arsenals were used in a war, about 10,000 megatons, the citizens of the non-involved countries would receive an average of 10 rems radiation total in the 30 years following. Since it takes a minimum of 150 rems exposure over a few days' time to threaten the life of a healthy human, 10 rems is relatively trivial, especially when it's spread over a 30-year period. At worst, it would result in a slight rise in the world's cancer rate. So such statements as, quote, between them, the United States and the Soviet Union alone have deployed over 50,000 nuclear bombs which stand ready to exterminate virtually all life on Earth, made by the well-meaning Dr. Helen Caldicott, is sure bunk. A number of investigations have been conducted on Bikini Atoll to see what the effect of high-level radioactivity lingering there after repeated atomic testing has on the ecology of the area. Findings are that, except where the explosion stripped the topsoil to bare rock, there has been little effect on the normal ecology of the area, both on sea and land. As good-hearted and well-intentioned as the physicians for social responsibility and similar groups are, they're spreading dangerous misinformation. They talk about bombs of 1,000 megatons, though none, as far as it is known, has been built to even 1/10 that size. They imply that a 1,000 megaton bomb would be 1,000 times more as destructive as a 1 megaton bomb. Yet it is a fact that increasing the size of a nuclear bomb by 10 only increases its destructive power by 2. They claim that the U.S. and the Soviet Union have enough nuclear weaponry to wipe out the entire population of the Earth several times over, but they don't explain that to do so, the entire Earth's population would have to be gathered into circular masses with a density of downtown Hiroshima, and a nuke exploded over each one. They claim that no one can shelter against a nuclear explosion, yet there were people who survived uninjured inside conventional air raid tunnel shelters, which were as close as 1/3 mile from ground zero at Nagasaki. These shelters lacked blast doors, too. All the surrounding above-ground structures were leveled far beyond. In his book, Nuclear War Survival Skills, Crescent H. Kearney shows a photo of a crude wooden-frame backyard earth-covered family shelter which survived the Nagasaki explosion virtually intact, less than 100 yards from ground zero. Bruce D. Clayton, Ph.D., author of Life After Doomsday, is another expert upset with the distortions being circulated by the misinformed well-meaning. He relates that he too had been convinced that a nuclear war, quote, would exterminate the human race, but in a spirit of scientific curiosity, I decided to go to the library and see what that war would do to the rest of the natural world. There he was astonished by the wealth of material on nuclear war available to any reader, including, in some cases, details on the construction of nuclear warheads. He also discovered that his prior beliefs about nuclear war exterminating the human race were not true. Quote, they weren't even nearly true. An informed and prepared family could come very close to achieving 100% probability of long-term survival. While I was in the library, I also discovered a very strange thing. In addition to the scientific literature about nuclear war, there was also abundant non-scientific literature. The strange thing was that the non-scientific books made very little mention of the scientific papers at all. Frequently, the information in these books was substantially in error, and the errors always pointed to the conclusion that the human race would not survive the war. In fact, the few cases I discovered in which the books did mention scientific studies, there was usually a severe distortion or even outright reversal of the information presented in the scientific source, end quote. Americans should be rational enough to see that even a heavy exchange between nuclear powers will not eliminate humanity when mankind has already experienced 1,507 nuclear explosions between 1945 and 1984. The U.S. did 756 of those, USR 556, France 127, United Kingdom 38, China 29, and India 1. At least 236 of the American tests alone were above ground with their intended fallout dangers. Generally unknown is that many of the underground explosions are also quite dirty. Most seep radiation into the ground and water table, and others spew exceptionally dirty particles into the air in an effect known as venting. Some underground tests do both of these. A number of the tests seem to have been conducted with a deliberate intent of studying the effects of fallout on the citizens of the surrounding communities. One series of tests even based U.S. troops as guinea pigs, used U.S. troops as guinea pigs. Marine Second Lieutenant Thomas Saffer was one such unfortunate in the 1950s. Saffer and his troops were ordered into a trench 2 miles from ground zero where a 38 kiloton bomb, about 3 times the power of the one at Hiroshima, was detonated. Saffer: I heard a loud click. Immediately, I felt an intense heat on the back of my neck. I was shocked when, with my eyes tightly closed, I could see the bones of my forearm as though I was examining a red X-ray. A light many times brighter than the sun penetrated the dust, and I imagined so on and so forth. You could see his bones through his eyelids and his skin. After that test, they marched these people right to ground zero, the Marines right to ground zero, had them walk around a little bit, then marched them back, let them brush themselves off with the brooms, fed them a lunch, and then they let them take showers and change their clothing. Meanwhile, the scientists who were conducting this experiment were all in their concrete bunkers safely 10 miles away. Okay? They did this to these guys several times. And of course, most of them have cancer now. But most of them survived. And that's the point. You can survive, and you can survive in health if you build yourself a shelter. Because fallout can be defended against. If an area is unfortunate enough to receive a very heavy fallout from a very dirty bomb of, say, which is 1,000, which will give you 1,000 rads in an hour, 1 hour after detonation, that radiation will decay to 480 rads 2 hours after, 100 rads 7 hours after, 43 rads 14 hours after, down to 10 rads 48 hours after. After 2 weeks' time, the dose rate is down to 1 rad hour, and it's safe to come out of the shelter, or to at least work for increasingly long periods outside. The exception to this would be downwind from a really critical area that receives multiple explosions, such as the silos of ICBMs. In those areas, additional shelter time will be needed. This is talking about nuclear explosions. There's a difference between nuclear explosions and meltdown in a nuclear power plant. The meltdown in the nuclear power plant is far more severe in terms of health factors, because that radiation does not decay anything like the radiation in a nuclear explosion. And I recall after the Chernobyl explosion, or the Chernobyl release meltdown that they had over there in the Soviet Union, somebody from Lawrence, a spokesman for Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, the U.S. super laboratory in California, related that the amount of danger posed by that single release in Chernobyl equaled or surpassed all of the atomic explosions that we have had in the history. Okay? Shortly after that, he made a retraction, and anybody who knows the political scene knows that the reason he made that retraction was because pressure from the nuclear industry. But anyway, to get down to the essentials here, Earth is a really good sheltering agent against radiation. Each 3 1/2 inches of packed Earth cuts the amounts of gamma rays penetrating by half. If you were exposed to fallout, which at a given moment would send 1,024 gamma rays into you, 3 1/2 inches of packed Earth would cut that to 512, another 3 1/2 inches would cut that to 256, another to 128, then to 64, then to 32. And that would be with a total of 18 inches of Earth. At 3 foot of Earth, coincidentally, the traditional amount of Earth covering a root cellar, Only one of those 1,024 gamma rays would penetrate for protection, for a PF, or protection factor, of 1,024. Bruce Clayton is fascinated, as are many others, with the sheltering possibilities of underground houses. He says, quote, "Even without any serious attempt to maximize the shelter potential, the deeper portions of a typical subterranean home provide protection well in excess of a PS of 40, the standard set by the Office of Civil Defense. With a little attention to detail, a PF of over 1,000 can be attained." So if one school of thought in the U.S. holds that the effects of nuclear war cannot be protected against, the other school believes very strongly that it can. The governments of the Soviet Union, China, Sweden, and Switzerland all believe that it is possible to survive the radiation, and it is their policy to prepare for it. According to various estimates, the Soviets spent between $8 and $20 annually per person for civil defense preparations. The government of Switzerland annually spends $10.85 per capita on civil defense, according to the Swiss Civil Defense magazine of November-December 1977. The United States spends approximately 50 cents per year per citizen for civil defense. The Soviet Union has constructed a massive system of fallout shelters around all of its cities. Sweden has great subterranean areas beneath many of its cities carved out of solid granite. China has a vast network of tunnels beneath its surface. Its cities have more livable work area beneath the surface than above. In Switzerland, it is illegal to build any school, office, factory, or home without a fully stocked fallout shelter. The U.S. has nothing like any of this. Subways and sewers in some cities may offer a degree of protection, but they are not stocked with water or food, and those seeking refuge there will be driven out into the fallout after a day or two by thirst alone. It has long been the official policy of the U.S. federal government to expose its citizens to the threat of nuclear annihilation. This is the, quote, hostage theory of mutually assured destruction. If our populace is vulnerable, we will not threaten the Soviets with nuclear attack. If you say that fast, it sounds pretty good. You can survive a nuclear war. And you can survive it for between $50 and $500. You should have gotten, along with this tape, some worksheets. At this time, these are 3 sheets. The first sheet is a 12 by 12 foot shelter. An elevation and a floor plan. The second sheet gives you a very small shelter diagram, like a 2-person shelter diagram. The 12 by 12 foot shelter, I forget exactly how many people I figured that could support, probably up to 12 people. Because we stack them up on bunks. If you get enough airflow through there, you can support up to 12 people in there. This little shelter on page 2 would support 2 people. And then we'll talk about this section a little later, which is how you can turn your shelter into a livable underground house after the time of need is past. And the final page here are items needed for the shelter, and we'll go through that in a bit. If you'll look at your diagram, and we'll zero in on the diagram down here now, you'll find that we've made every inch count in this shelter. I've designed it for an area that may have a high water runoff, say in the West Coast area. So I put in what I call a ship's prow put it in a hillside, and hopefully it will run most of the water off around the shelter. In the event that the walls leak, I want you to dig into the earthen floor around there, a little drainage area, all the way around that. And I want you to have this area 3 or 4 or 5 inches higher than this area over in here. I want you to be able to drain that shelter out the entranceway. This is not, this is for an extremely high rain area. You shouldn't have this problem in most areas. But with the weather patterns changing as they are, it's going to be a good idea to have this little ditch in there anyway. The most important thing is when you build this shelter, have this area higher than this area over here so you can drain it through. You can always dig that ditch if you have to on the spur of the moment. I put a lot of posts in this 12 by 12 foot shelter. It's every 4 foot in one direction and 6 foot in the other. And we divide it into 2 sections. One section here is a sleeping area, and that has 1 sleeping level, a 2nd sleeping level, and then we put a 3rd sleeping level up here running across this section in here, in the very highest part. Now, you'll have 3 sleeping levels in here that are 6 foot wide and 12 foot long, so you can sleep presumably perhaps 3 people to a section here, certainly 2 people comfortably, and 2 more on this side, 4 to a shelf, foot to foot. This area over here is for walking around in, getting up, exercising, moving around in, and it's also for where you'll operate your air pump. The most important interior consideration in an underground shelter is getting air through there, because airflow is the thing that's going to make this go. If you have 12 bodies in there, or if you even have 4 bodies in a 12 by 12 foot shelter, the body heat alone in this underground structure is going to raise that to almost unbearable conditions. The temperature and the humidity. So you've got to have a good airflow. And we'll show you a book later on, Crescent Kearney's book, that will tell you how to make a homemade air filter. Kearney air pump can be made from very low-cost materials. Something I forget what he quotes in the book, but I would say you can make the air pump for less than $10, and it will pump enough air through this 12 by 12 foot shelter to do you. I have an error in this diagram, and I've put a very small exhaust vent up here. When you build your exhaust vent, I want you to, instead of an 8-inch pipe, which is what I put up here, what I want you to build is a 2 by 2 foot shaft that comes out a little ways and then shoots up and then has a peaked roof over it. And I'll draw a diagram of that in a minute. That's so to give you an escape hatch out and also to facilitate the flow of air through there. Once again, getting air in that shelter, getting enough air to keep the heat and the humidity down is your most important internal consideration in this. Another important consideration, of course, is sewage, body waste. And what I'm suggesting you do here is you buy these plastic buckets that were once used for food and so forth, and which have covered tops. Around our area, they sell these buckets for about 99 cents in the grocery marts. They're empty buckets. They hold between 4 and 7 gallons each, and you can sit right on them and excrete and then just cap them up again. And I suggest that you put that toilet bucket up in the ship's prow section up here where you're storing all your food and so forth, And you have your airflow coming through, and that'll take the odors out and flush them out up there, and the odors won't be hopefully contaminating the area in there. Humorously, to me anyway, I gave this shelter workshop over in Washington one time for a very large crowd, and the crowd was very concerned about what they would do with this waste afterwards. And believe me, that's the least of your worries. What they wanted to do was dig a pit in here and have a regular latrine in the place, and I didn't think that was a very good idea. You'd have to cut down the odor, you'd have to really cap that well, or you'd have to keep throwing dirt back in there. And if you have 12 people living in this place and eating during a 14-day period, you're going to have a lot of waste there. Use these buckets for water first, and as you empty them, use them for toilet. What you do with it afterwards, I suggested then, was that you cap them, you put a big bow on it, and you send them to the neighbor who's given you all that trouble. What you do, of course, is you take these things out in the woods or even on your garden plot, and you slosh them out. It's the same waste as you get from dogs and horses and the whole bit, and they throw theirs on the ground. You can throw yours on the ground too. It's the least of your problems, let me tell you. You're going to need, in this place, you're going to need a hole in the entranceway here and a buried garbage can. And this is so that latecomers coming in or people who have to dive out there for any reason and come back in again can strip down, sponge bathe, and stash their clothing in that garbage can and lid it over again. I would suggest, this is the one place I have a disagreement with Crescent Kearney. Kearney is a remarkable man. He worked for Oak Ridge National Laboratories for a number of years and studied this really carefully. He's certainly one of the leading, if not the leading expert on fallout sheltering in the United States. But the one place the one place I'm really sort of alarmed with Kearney is he doesn't believe it's necessary to filter the air that comes through. His theory is that if you are close to the explosion, the particles that fall at first are going to be heavy and they won't be pulled into your fallout shelter, and the finer particles are going to blow away, and they will be on high elevation, and they will blow for several weeks, and their radiation will burn out before they sift to the ground. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If you're pumping that air in, certainly there's got to be dust in there. And he says, he admits, well, if there's windstorms or something, there may be dust, and there may, but that to him isn't his most important consideration. There are going to be windstorms. There's going to be forest fires and everything else, and they always create windstorms. My suggestion is that you build into something like a screen door. You take out the screen and you put fireplace, forced air furnace filters in place of the screen. And you can have a door, then that screen door that you can open and close to get in and out. But in this area in here, and when you close it, then the filters will be in effect. When you open it, you can get in and out. Let's go back up to the blackboard for a moment here. And look at the principle of the Kearney air filter, or the Kearney air pump. He calls it a CAP, KAP, Kearney air pump. His system is to build a frame, and this is the side view of the frame, and to run wires through there like this. In fact, I think it puts the wires on, attaches them to the top here, that run across the frame. frame looks like this, looking at it head on, and you've got wires in here. Then he takes a plastic and he runs it from here to this wire and loops it over that wire and attaches it to itself. And he does the same thing here. He runs a plastic down to here, and again runs a plastic from here and attaches it to this, loops it over. He does this all the way down. Like that. Now they're attached only at one end, and they overlap the next wire. Then he attaches a rope here to a pulley here, down here, so that you can pull down on this. And when you pull down, you make this whole thing swing up. And as it swings up, these bits of plastic are flush against the other wire. It's a fairly stiff plastic. So they're flush against the other wire. So when you pull up, you create an airflow. And when you let go of this rope, it comes back down, but each of these plastics flutters up. So that only on the up thrust do you get a real push of air. And when it comes down, there's little air resistance. So on the up thrust, it pumps air. Down, it primes again, and then pumps, primes, pumps, primes. And it's that simple. That's the Kearney air pump. Kearney also has a dosimeter. This is the book. This is Kearney's book. The one that you can get now, and it's still in print, the one you get now has a green cover. It's called Nuclear War Survival Skills by Crescent Kearney. And he's a highly educated man, educated overseas and so forth. In fact, I think we could probably even show some of these diagrams on the tube here. I don't believe that this is a copyrighted book. He wrote this book when he was working for Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and when you work for the federal government, whatever you write while in their employ, you cannot copyright. So I don't think this was, I don't know if this particular edition was copyrighted by somebody else. He's made a meter also. Tells you how to make a meter in here, which will tell you how much radiation is still out there. The Kearney fallout meter, he calls it a KFM. Here is the list of materials needed to make a fallout meter. You don't need to spend hundreds of dollars. Any type of metal can. Now, I'm not going to read you the descriptions of these things. I'm just going to read the general description. For example, any type of metal can approximately 2 and 19/16 inches in diameter inside and so far outside. Anyway, a metal can. Standard aluminum foil, 2 square feet. Doorbell wire or other light insulated wire. Any type of lightweight thread. A piece of clear plastic. Cloth duct tape. Band-aid tape or masking tape or freezer tape or Scotch tape, transparent tape. Gypsum wallboard, about 1/2 square foot, best about 1/2 inch thick. Glue, an ordinary wooden pencil and a small toothpick. 2 strong rubber bands or string. Several small transparent plastic bags, such as the sandwich bags. And for the charging device, most hard plastic rubbed on dry paper, plexiglass, and Scotch tape. For determining dose rates and recording doses received, a watch, a flashlight, and pencil and paper. And you have to have a dry bucket. It's got to be charged inside a dry bucket. You need a large bucket, pot or can, clear plastic, polyethylene it's talking about there, 4 mil thick, cloth duct tape, 2 plastic bags, 14 to 16 inches in circumference, about 1 square foot of wallboard, again sheetrock, 2 1-quart mason jars, strong rubber bands. I suggest strongly that you buy this book. And if you don't even want to put the, your fallout meter together now, if you don't even want to put your Kearney air pump together now, store those materials in your fallout shelter, in your shelter. Hopefully you won't need it for fallout. Hopefully you'll use it for root cellar for the next 20 years. But if you make these small investments now and build yourself your economy $50 shelter or your palatial $500 shelter, if you take a little effort now, a couple of afternoons to store this material and get a hold of this book and store the other material needed, you're going to make it through. It's going to take you more than several afternoons to build this the shelter itself, but if you get in a backhoe to do the digging and you have all your materials on hand, a couple of you can certainly build this thing, certainly can build it in a couple of weeks. Okay, and then a couple of afternoons working on putting the material in there that you'll need to survive, and you've got it, okay? And you use this thing for a root cellar. Use it for storing goods. Use it for storing tools and lumber and food, okay? Let's see if we can't take a look here at the Kearney, some of the diagrams on the Kearney fallout shelter. This book apparently is not copyright, so I'm going to reproduce this on tape. Here's a Kearney air pump in motion. Right now, in this upper one, the pull cord has slackened, and it's on the downside, and the flaps are loose. It swings back, and then it comes on the upswing, and when it comes on the upswing, these flaps flap down, and it pushes the air through. And this diagram here shows you something that I forgot to mention earlier. You have a flap stop, and this is like chicken wire that he's got here. And then you have a second wire, which is your hinge wire. And I'm going to read to you a list in a moment of materials needed for this air pump, which is almost as simple as the of his fallout meter, Kearney fallout meter. Ridiculously simple materials, which Kearney developed here, and gives you really workable stuff. I was selling for a while air pumps, which probably don't pump even as much air as this, and I was selling them for $185, I think. And you can build this thing for probably under 10 again, I'm sure. Kearney's really into these small, expedient shelters. That's been the main thrust of his research. And here he's got a a little basement shelter here, and he shows a guy pulling this by hand, not with a hinge, but he shows you in other places in this book how to make a hinge out of a tree branch and so forth, so that you can pull down instead of straight. You can lay down and pull on it then. Let me go back up and read to you the section on the materials needed to build this. Okay, these are the materials that's needed to build this air pump instead of a $185 machined air pump. You need 22 foot of 1 by 2 inch boards. You need some hinges, a couple of hinges, door cabinet butt hinges. You need a board for the fixed horizontal support, such as a 1 by 4. You need some small nails, at least 24 small nails, like number 6 box nails. Then you need some plastic film or other very light, flexible material. And you need about 12 square feet in pieces that can be cut into 9 rectangular strips, each 30 by 5.5 inches. Polyethylene film of 3 or 4 mil is perfectly fine for this. And you need some pressure-sensitive waterproof tape, enough for 30 foot of tape, 3/4 to 1 inch wide. You need some flat pivot wires, which are 30 foot of smooth wire, at least as heavy and as springy as a coat hanger wire. That can be made into very straight pieces, each 29 inches long. You need a pull cord. It's at least 10 foot. You need flap stops, 150 foot of light string, or I think you get by with chicken wire on that, and 90 tacks. That's the total materials that you need to build this thing, okay? And the tools that you need are a hammer, saw, wire cutters, wire cutter pliers, screwdriver, scissors, knife, yardstick, and pencil. That's desirable. However, only a strong, sharp knife is essential for making some models. This guy has got it down. He's got about 20 pages in here of how to build that. About another 20 pages of how to make the fallout meter. I want to talk a little bit about the things you'll need in the items you'll need in the shelter. You'll need water in the slop buckets. Those are the buckets I told you about, the plastic buckets that you can get at your local IGA, okay, or other grocery store. First you use them for water, and then you use them for body waste. But you're going to need between 3/4 to 1 gallon of water per person per day. You're going to need some food. The Mormon 4, incidentally, the Mormons who are right up on preparation, are wheat berries, salt, honey, and powdered milk. You can do all kinds of things with it. The Mormons have a number of books out on survival preparation, and they do things like sprout the wheat berries and so forth. And you can make a great variety of stuff from those 4 things. That's the basic 4. You'll want some other food in there for variety. You'll need bedding. You'll need changes of clothing and toilet articles, matches, which should be waterproof because, again, the humidity is going to be very high in this fallout shelter, and it's going to make your matches mushy otherwise. And butane lighters are a good thing to have along, little cigarette lighters, because they'll light when matches won't. You're going to need some candles in there, and some of the survival outfits sell candles that will burn for a week. And you buy a case of these candles, and you've got something like 6 months of fire in your light in your fallout shelter. But you're definitely going to need some light in there. You're going to go nuts if you're in there in the dark, let me tell you. Okay, you'll need the Kearney fallout meter or the full materials to make one. And of course, you're going to have the air pump of some kind. I would suggest some breathing masks in case you have to go outside or in case you have to remodel inside the fallout shelter. And once again, at several of these things when I've spoken before, sometimes several hundred people, I get a big laugh when I talk about remodeling the fallout shelter. But I suggest very much that you keep some tools in there and some spare lumber. You might want to build backrests. You might want to build air baffles. You might want to build extra sleeping lofts for children or something of the sort. There could be any number of things that you might want to build in that fallout shelter when you're in there for 2 weeks or longer. And if you don't have the materials, you're really going to be frustrated. So it costs you almost nothing to store a little extra lumber, and it's easy to store. You just lay that down on top of the bunks. Okay? The breathing masks, if you do have to remodel in there and do some digging and so forth, there's going to be a lot of dust in that place. And also, if you have to dive outside for whatever reason, for a short period, it's a really good idea to have breathing masks. Going to need games, books, and writing supplies in there to keep you busy, keep you happy, keep you occupied, keep you so you're not thinking about what's happened to civilization. Going to need a copy of Kearney's Nuclear War Survival Skills, okay? And you're going to need some, probably some seeds for when you come out again that aren't contaminated. You're going to need, I would put in a roll of polyethylene there, at least one roll of, I would say, a minimum of 15 by 50 foot roll of polyethylene, 4 to 6 mil, clear. And you'll be able to add on to your fallout shelter then. You'll be able to build little emergency greenhouses or growing pits, and you'll be able to make window glazing out of that. Should have some wire, twine, rope, and tape, nails, tacks, screws, and other hardware, lumber, as I mentioned, a flat file for sharpening your tools, a chisel, carpenter's crosscut saw, a claw hammer, and the two most important tools that you should, by all means, have in there are an axe and a shovel, round nose shovel. It's actually sort of a pointed nose shovel. These things, so that if for any reason you're blocked in there by the blast, by falling trees, in the forest fires that will follow, by landslides, floods, or whatever's coming, okay, whatever might, a collapsing building, whatever might block you in that fallout shelter, if you have an axe and a shovel, and if you build your shelter out of wood, you'll be able to chop your way through that wood, and you'll be able to dig your way up and out. So an axe and a shovel, I would leave those in your shelter at all times, and I would not borrow those to work in the garden or anything else. I would keep those in that fallout shelter along with some water and these other items, and then you'd be ready. Okay? I want to talk for a few minutes about what you can do with that fallout shelter after the cataclysms, and I want to show you how you can add on to the fallout shelter and turn it into an underground house, which will take you through whatever else is coming. And then after that, we're going to do some talking about greenhouses, which I didn't mention at the early part of this tape. But we've got a little section on greenhouses here. We're going to take you through earth-sheltered greenhouses, which are really nice to have. Your food is protected in a greenhouse from the fallout. Okay, your green-growing food, just batten down that greenhouse when the fallout's about to come over. And remember that fallout itself does not contaminate food unless it gets into the food. If you have a glass container, for example, with peaches in it, and there's fallout all around on the ground, that glass container can stay out there for weeks in that fallout. And you can blow and wash the contamination off the can, off the jar, and open it and eat those peaches at any time. It's not, it probably has done less harm to your food than your microwave does to your food, okay? As long as the fallout is not in the food itself, not mixed in there. Keep your food and your water covered, and you'll be all right. Even if you have to store that outside, as long as it's covered, you can still use it. All right, let's go to, I'm going to put up some scale models here, and we'll see how we can turn a fallout shelter into a usable structure afterward. And remember that all through this tape, where we're talking about shelter, and we're talking about survival greenhouses, okay, we're also talking about a structure that you can and should use on a daily basis for other things. Hopefully we won't need these, but we may need them, okay? So we go ahead and we build a structure which has 2 or more uses, which has a daily use now, which has a survival use in time of need, and which can be used for other things after the time of the cataclysms. So let me get the scale models up here on the table, and we'll go to that. In order to teach you what you can do with your underground shelter after the time you need it for radiation or fire or whatever the combination, earthquake, whatever's coming, okay? After you feel that that's done, and you want to, and the above ground structures are blown down, burned up, what have you, and you find yourself living in this 12 by 12 foot structure with a family and probably friends, you're going to want to know how to make that livable, to make it, rather than a shelter, a livable structure, and you're going to want to know how to add on to that to begin turning it into a bona fide, certified underground house. In order to do that, in order to give you some comprehension of this, I am going to run through extremely fast the approved methods of underground design. I'm going to show you the 4 foolish methods of underground design. And I'm going to do this very fast. Don't try to use this tape to design an underground house with now that you're going to live in now. If you want to design an underground house now, buy the tape 2, that deals specifically with low-cost underground housing, because we take you through designs and we discuss this all very thoroughly in there, and we teach you then. Right now, we're going to give you an idea. And hopefully you'll remember this, enough of it anyway, so that you have some comprehension of what you can do with your shelter afterwards. Remember, you may not have electricity, and you may not be viewing this slides afterwards. These slides. Perhaps you'll have a gas generator for a little bit. Perhaps you can run some of this off of batteries or solar. But at any rate, I'm just going to give you some basic ideas now and run them through. You can replay this again and again to get the basic concept. Most people, when they build underground houses, most of the underground houses built today are what I call the first thought house. You have a hillside coming down like this, and you put in a house like this so that you get this view down the hill. When you do that, you get no air circulation through here because you have windows only on one side. You get no cross ventilation. You get no balance of light. Again, lights are only from one side. You have an entrance only from one side. The worst thing that happens is you have all your moisture coming down the hill, backing up against your back wall, and all the moisture on your roof draining down against the back wall, and your back wall is going to leak. Okay, so I don't do the first thought design when I design myself. I'll show you what I do later on. I turn that around and I put it in the basic design. I don't do atriums like this. It's 3 or 4 sides looking out on a courtyard. I don't do that because it's got lousy view, and there are other reasons why I don't do it. Sometimes I might do some of these things in urban areas, but I try not to design with them at all myself. I don't put on skylights. Why? Skylights leak. Skylights bleed out the heat in the wintertime. Skylights get just a sliver of the winter sun through there because the sun's coming in at a low angle and doesn't heat up the place in the wintertime. In the summertime, on the other hand, a skylight blasts heat down into the house and directly in, and things fall through skylights. And the worst thing about skylights, in my mind, is they give you no view whatsoever unless you want to look straight up and you might see a cloud. Maybe on an static day you might see a hawk circling up there or something. But that's it. That's your view if you want to look up straight. I don't use skylights either. And I don't use lateral window wells, which are tubes like this. When they build the first thought houses with the hillside coming down like this, in desperation to get some kind of light and escape out of the back end of that thing, they put in these concrete tubes with rungs in there that they climb up out of. That does let in some light, and if you're in good shape, you can climb up the rungs. If you don't have arthritis or a broken bone or something, you can climb up out of the rungs. But again, what is your view out of that? None whatsoever. It's a view of a concrete tube. And these things cost generally around $3,000 each. You can build several of my houses for $3,000. So those are the foolish 4, I consider the foolish 4 things I don't do. What do? I build a structure that is in conformity with the earth, rather than the first thought design like this in a hillside sloping down. I turn that around. Okay? Here it is, turned around. And now everything, all the moisture that falls on this roof goes downhill, away from the house. Gravity is helping you to keep your house waterproof instead of causing problems. And we're working with gravity here. Next thing I do is I put in an uphill patio in there. And the uphill patio interrupts the drainage coming down the hill. I back pitch each of these terraces so it catches the water and it allows it to absorb into the ground before it reaches the house. If it's under a heavy rain area or something, or if I want to turn that into a greenhouse, then I cover that with fiberglass or tempered glass, and I catch the water here and I run that off to the sides. And I've got a greenhouse there. I've got something that catches the moisture so it doesn't go down into the patio. That's in a high rain area, Oregon or Washington, so forth. So this is the basic design with an uphill patio. Next thing I do, if I want to open this place up, is I can put in a Royer foyer. It's a pie-shaped excavation in the hillside. We saw some of that in the slides in tape 1. I can put in a Hollywood wing. Now that opens up this area here, and because I'm shunting my moisture off onto this section here, that allows me to open up that section there. Now I've got a whole light and airy corner here. I can put in a side hill patio right there. Now the structure has lots of light from that side. It's a nice thing to do if, say, this is south, and I want to blast sunshine in that house if I'm not down in Arizona or something. Okay? Or I can add a sun scoop in the place. Get even more sunlight in there. I can put on a gable. Here's a roof with a gable built in. Put on a gable. And that's shunting my moisture off on either side onto solid earth. And it allows me to open up this area here. I could put on an extended gable and mark this one well, because this is something that you can do to your shelter later on. It's an extended without radically changing, without pulling off your whole roof and so forth. You can add an extended gable, and now you get some light, air, and views and an entrance from this side. I can put on, add on afterwards, after the structure is complete, onto the fallout shelter. I can add an extended Hollywood wing. If I want to add on to this room I can offset a room like this. And now since this is a new room that I'm adding on here, if I say put a gable up here, so I shunt my moisture off to the sides on this, that allows me to open an area down in here and not only get light into this gable area here, but it's also opening up this section here. In the meantime, of course, because this is offset, and I've got an uphill patio on this as well as this, I'm now looking out of this section in here out into the uphill patio. So the offset room gets lights in here and allows a light area in there. I can add a wraparound. Again, this is another thing you might think of, particularly on a fallout shelter that you want to turn into a house. We'll look at that in a minute. That's called a wraparound window. This is all earth out here. And you're bringing the uphill patio around just a little bit. Not a full side hill patio, just a little wraparound here. And one final thing, you can add a clear story. It's raising one section up over the other. And that allows you to put some windows in here. Less than you think you'll have because you've got earth on this roof. But you can put some windows in there. Okay, that's basically, I think that covers all 12 here. Let's look at your fallout shelter and see how we can work with this structure and turn it easily into a living structure. Your basic fallout shelter always has a shed roof. You want a shed roof on that thing, not only for the moisture, drainage, runoff of your roof. You never want a flat roof. Flat roofs always leak. Almost invariably they leak. And if you have earth on that roof, you have to take off all that earth to try to look for the leak. You'll patch the leak, you put all the earth back on again, and some of it you're going to leak on you again. Almost invariably happens, okay? Put a good pitch on your roof. 1 and 3 is what I like. Pitch of 1 and 3. 1 foot of fall for every 3 foot of floor length. And on that 12 by 12 foot underground diagram that's on the first page of your handout sheet, I put in the ship's prow, and that's covered too. That's got roof area on it also. Okay. And what the ship's prow does is deflect the moisture, hopefully, away from the house when it's coming down the hill. There may be some that gets in there once again, you've got little drainage ditches around there, and you've run your drainage out the downhill side. But the ship's prow will give you a space up front that you use for storage space, toilet area, air exhaust, escape hatch out, and if that gets moist, it's not a disaster. So you got the ship's prow, and everything else on this structure is covered, except everything on this structure is covered, in fact, except the doors out. Okay, the first thing you can do, the ship's prow, you understand, should come all the way out. I'm making do with this. The first thing you can do on this, on your fallout shelter, to turn it into a more livable year-round structure, is you can uncover the ship's prow. And now what you've got is a mini uphill patio. And if you don't have window glass, we've asked you before to keep a roll of 4 or 6 mil polyethylene in the shelter as part of your shelter material. And what you can do then is you can put that fiberglass down over the front here, take off whatever shoring you had there separating the living area from the ship's prow, take off that shoring, put that polyethylene down, which gives you window area, and now you've got light and air coming down through the ship's prow. It's now a mini uphill patio. Another thing you can do without a whole lot of grief and effort to turn this little 12 by 12 foot into a light living area is you can excavate out here and make the Royer foyer. Okay? Make your Royer foyer. All that takes is some digging. Again, if you have clear polyethylene, you can put that in there and turn that into a light area, a window area. You're not modifying the structure in any way. You're not modifying the structure here in any way other than taking some boards off here and some boards off here. You're not modifying the basic structure. You don't have to do a whole lot of effort on this. You can, if you wish. I have to say, on the diagram, you've got an escape area shown out here. That might be an area to turn into a Royer foyer. Okay, that's your entrance area is out here or out here. And you dig that out, and you can use that lumber for other things. You dig that out and turn this into a Royer foyer. Another thing you can do without modifying the whole structure is you can dig out here, take the boards out there, and build your add-on extended gable. And or, if you wish, you can make it a Hollywood wing. These are 4 things you can do now to turn your shelter into a livable home without a whole lot of effort and carpentry. You don't have to tear off this roof. The only walls that you're tearing out are the ones to give you window space. Take some digging. You're going to need some exercise after some weeks in the shelter anyway. If you want to add on to this structure, a really good way to do that is to go with a clear story because then you don't have all of the problem of trying to overlap your polyethylene as you would if you go like this. Okay? If you go up like this, you can leave this polyethylene here as it is, just bring it up a little bit for some shoring here for your 18 inches of earth. Well, you got 3 foot of earth on that roof. You bring it up for 3 foot. And then you start a new polyethylene altogether out here. Something I haven't showed you so far is when you put polyethylene on your structure, whether it be a shelter or an underground home, take that polyethylene out at least 3 foot. Some people are saying take it out 10 or 12 feet. And I can't argue with that. I said 3 foot, and a fella in Missoula, Montana suggests 12 foot now, so that you turn this into a thermal heat sink. But anyway, take your first layer of polyethylene and bring it down like that. You've got your wall polyethylene that has come up, and it's the first. Then you put on your first layer of roof polyethylene and overlap it over that. Then you put on 4 inches of earth, so it will disperse whatever water makes it through the top layer of polyethylene. Now this layer of polyethylene you extend out a minimum of 3 feet so that it takes the moisture away from the structure before it's allowed to settle into the ground. But what I want you to know here is that when you bring this bit out, give it a little tuck in here, like this. Shown in large scale. Why that tuck? Because you have backfilled in here, and unless you have tamped really well, that's going to settle on you. And if you have just a straight length of polyethylene going down there, it's liable to pull that in and tear the polyethylene. If you have a tuck in there, that tuck will unfold a little bit, okay? And it won't tear, and you'll still have a continuous layer of polyethylene going down the hill. All right, let me clean up this now, and we'll get into greenhouses. You should have one. You'd have one now so that you can get yourself really fresh, organic vegetables. Cut your food costs. Get good, clean food, not sprayed food. Food that's grown in soil, that's mineralized with natural fertilizers, fish emulsion, manure, kelp, and so forth. Not buy food that was grown on depleted soils in California or Mexico or Peru or someplace, shipped up days or weeks away, perhaps irradiated. But food that you pick and you're eating 10 or 15 minutes later. That's what I did last night. Picked it out of both my garden and my greenhouse, and I had myself a wonderful salad last night. In the wintertime, I still have a wonderful salad because I've got a couple of greenhouses. These are, my main greenhouse is earth sheltered. And I'm going to take you now through the progression that led me to this greenhouse. And I'm going to show you how to build an even better greenhouse than I have. And the greenhouse that I have, even though I am 30 miles from the Canadian border, takes my tomatoes into the first or second week in December, when everybody else around here, the garden tomatoes are lost in the first week in September, and most greenhouse tomatoes are lost the first week in October. But because mine is earth sheltered, and because I have a cold sink in the greenhouse, which I'll explain, I take my tomatoes into December. I take things, the hardies like kale, kohlrabi, cabbage, parsley, Swiss chard, some of the lettuces. I take these clear through the winter, most winters. Really severe winter, okay, I can lose those too. But this is a greenhouse that has no other source of energy other than the heat from the earth and the sunshine. And I haven't even had dual pane windows on it, okay? Not double thickness glazing in any way, shape, or form. Let me show you what my thinking was and how I came about this greenhouse concept. I knew when I first began homesteading in the late 60s, I knew that farmers for many years had what they called grow holes, which was a pit 3 foot deep, maybe 4 foot wide, I don't know how long, but 3 foot deep. And they usually put a foot of horse manure, fairly fresh horse manure in there, and then 6 inches of topsoil next. Then they planted in here, and they covered this with glass or fiberglass or polyethylene. Polyethylene will disintegrate quite quickly, so that's the least of that's the third choice. Good tempered glass is, or glass of any kind, storm windows is probably your first choice, although that can break. So fiberglass in many cases might be your first choice. At any rate, they glazed this. And the heat from the earth, the heat from the sun, and the heat generated by the horse manure working off kept the grow hole warm. They would do this. They would add this horse manure in the topsoil early in the spring, and they would start their plants down here for their gardens, their row crops. That was good. But I began to wonder how to do this better. I began to think, hey, if you got glazing over like that, you have to take that glazing off every time to get in there. You're losing all that heat to get in there and to work on it. So I want some area that I can be inside and work on this thing with the glazing still on it. Furthermore, when the sun is really low, as it is in the spring, early spring, the sun's coming down, and much of that sun is being deflected off. When it comes in at a really oblique angle like this, you can lose up to 95% of your growth rates. So, the first way I set about improving the traditional grow hole was I put a pitch on it, so the sun rays penetrate better, and so I had area to move around in here and work on the beds without taking off all the glazing. I had this area here exposed to the atmosphere, and it's not getting any growth rays in there. It was boards. So what I did was when I dug out my grow hole, I mounted the earth out there and made a heat sink and an insulation. The next thing I noticed was, hey, with the sun over here, low in the springtime and the fall, when I needed the sun the most, I was losing this much area here that didn't get any sunshine. Nothing was growing well in there. At least nothing that I started in early spring. So what I decided to do was utilize that area as a place to stand by digging a pit there. Now I could stand in this pit and lean over and work on these plants. My first greenhouse, it was on flatland. This is a flatland design. And it started off to be 6 foot wide, and now I turned it into a 4 foot wide bed, and I could pretty much reach that 4 foot while standing in this pit. And I discovered a wonderful thing. Discovered this by accident. Instead of the cold air coming down and settling on the plants here, it now settled down into the pit. And because I was lower into the earth, getting closer to that 8 foot that stays the yearly mean temperature, the closer I got to that 8 foot, the warmer this earth was in the wintertime. And the more heat it gave off to warm up that cold air and keep that cold air from stacking up and finally getting over the plants. The end result was I probably gained another 5 to 10 degrees of coldness in this greenhouse. If, say, the greenhouse without that took my tomatoes down to, maybe 20 degrees outside, and the tomatoes would still live. Maybe they froze at 19 degrees outside. With this pit, it took it down to at least 15 degrees or 14 degrees before they began to freeze. And that's after a number of days of losing of cold weather. A one-night freeze of 15 degrees, you have a lot better chance of bringing your tomatoes through than, of course, a week of 15-degree weather. But anyway, that was my original greenhouse, and we'll see some slides of that in a moment. Then I built a hillside greenhouse. And we'll see some slides of this too. This is a greenhouse I'm still using. The original flatland greenhouse, I finally tore it down. I didn't build it out of good materials, but the main thing I didn't like about that greenhouse was I usually lost my sun there in late October. That's not the greenhouse that took my tomatoes through to December. I lost my sun there because there was a hill to the south, to the lee of that, and come late October I got no sunlight at that greenhouse. So I built a greenhouse on a hillside, and I think it's about 8 foot here that I went down, and it would have been about 3 foot here, except, of course, having learned my lesson, I went down another 6 foot or so here and made my cold sink, my pit. That was too low to be able to stand and work on these plants, so I built a platform along here. I stand on the platform and work on these plants, or climb up in here and work on these plants. I catch my moisture off the glazing here. I used fiberglass on that. I caught the moisture off that and ran it into some barrels that I had laying down in here. Okay, now this is the greenhouse. I also I'm still using this greenhouse. I also have a little entranceway here. I was supposed to have an airlock in there. The entranceway hasn't worked real well, but that's irrelevant. Despite all my crowing about how well this is done, I could do much better, and I will do much better on the next design. Incidentally, I put grow beds in here too. So these beds will last. The things growing in these beds will usually last a couple of weeks longer than the ones growing on here, the plants growing on here, because first the cold air starts stacking up here, then eventually it starts stacking up in here, but it takes a while to work up, another couple of weeks till it's killing these guys up there. Okay, now, I can do better than this. First of all, I would modify several things. I would make sure that this was high enough and that the spaces in between my posts would allow me to put water barrels in here, or barrels, 55-gallon drums. Paint them black, put water in there. And that's a heat sink. That sunshine coming in warms those barrels, and that'll, in the daytime they'll radiate heat at night. Second thing I would do, I would modify the design. I would come out at a fairly mild angle here with plywood, and then from here down, I would come down at a sharper angle down here, and I would use thermopane windows, like patio door, sliding patio doors, which you can get at salvaged houses, which you can get from places that sell what are called seconds. These have been scratched a little bit or something, they have a little chip in them, and they sell these for maybe $35, $40 each, as opposed to $600 and $700 for a new one, a first. Okay, so you can get a bunch of those, and for several $100s you can build yourself a really big greenhouse. This is the part that I would put in glass. This I would put in plywood. I normally don't build with plywood, but I would use it in a greenhouse where I'm not inhaling it, inhaling what it outgasses. I would put it in plywood, and I would put some insulation underneath this. Now, this plywood, I would hinge it here, and in the summertime, I'll be able to pull that plywood up and attach it to a rack up here and fasten it, and that'll let the summer sun in and the heat out, the excess heat out. In the wintertime and or on a cold night, I'll close that, fasten that down. It's insulated now, and in the wintertime, the sun is lower and it's not coming in up here, it's coming in through the glass windows in the spring, fall, and wintertime. And that essentially is how I would improve my greenhouse. Always when you build these things, you've got to have posts up here, posts here. Always when you build with this method, you have to have some way, and posts up here, you have to have some means of keeping these posts from pushing in above, and if you build with piers as I did, pushing in from the bottom too, from hinging down there. And so you have to, if you built with piers here, like we explained earlier in the slideshow, built with piers, you'll have to have some reinforcement that runs across there. The walking platform here acts to keep these posts from pushing in on you, both above and below. The walking platform does it for both. But at any rate, this is the state of my thinking now at this point. I think that this is the finest greenhouse that I can think of at this point. And of course, if you wanted to add some heat in there, there's no way that you couldn't have a greenhouse in, say, Alaska. And I am appalled at all of the commercial greenhouses built in America. They're built above ground like this. Every one that I know of, at any rate, built above ground like that, just radiating heat out all over the place and getting just a touch of heat in from the surface here. And of course, their most costly expense the most costly item on these greenhouses is the heating. Plus, of course, they're using much more glazing than they really need. If this is south here, how much sunlight do you think is coming through here? And yet they have that in usually in window also. Okay? This one works. This one works only with a great energy push. Let's go see some slides now of the two greenhouses that I have built, remembering again that you can do better than I've done. I hope you're going to do better than I've done. You should do better than I've done. But nevertheless, what I've done is still better than most of the greenhouses going. I've taken a quantum leap ahead of most greenhouses going. You are going to take another quantum. Okay, this was the building of the original greenhouse of mine. And you're looking at a volunteer, Josh, there, who's down in the cold sink. It was about 4 foot deep. I think he's probably kneeling down a little bit there. But anyway, the greenhouse itself was about 2.5 foot deep, and then the cold sink went down another 4 foot or so. And I'm mounding the earth to the north, which is off to the right. You see the mound of the earth off to the right. Some shoring. I used clear flat sheet polyethylene on this. That was a mistake. I should have used at least corrugated polyethylene, which we'll see on the next thing, for strength and ease of putting it down. Josh is putting down some manure there now. And I've just never had luck working with polyethylene. I always get this Bose in it. Other guys who have worked with me have done much better. I finally started putting struts in there to try to get that polyethylene to lay flat. But some people have a knack of laying that polyethylene out, some people don't. That's not polyethylene, it's fiberglass. It's fiberglass. In fact, it's Sears clear fiberglass is what I used. And this would be into October, as we planted this thing in, I don't know, July, maybe. And those are tomato plants against the back wall, so that's at least 3 months of growing anyway. And I won't be getting much more sunlight in that greenhouse. I'll be losing the tomatoes pretty quick, and then the other things, like this looks like lettuce or kale here, and that'll go a little longer. This was the hillside greenhouse then that we built, and we had a deeper grow pit on this, a cold sink on this. The fellow standing there is standing on the work platform, and the cold sink goes down 4 or 5 foot lower than that, close to 5 foot lower than that. And once again, the cold air, instead of settling down on this, goes over into the pit. The fiberglass we used on this was a brand name called Phylon. And when we go out in the field, we'll see this greenhouse in operation, and you're going to be disappointed in what's growing in the greenhouse. There's not much growing in it now. For the last 3 or 4 years, I've had real trouble growing in it, and I'm pretty sure what the problem is this fiberglass has finally become opaque enough, has become cloudy enough, that it's just simply not letting through the growth rays anymore. It's probably blocking out maybe 80% of the growth rays and only letting 20% through. So what I have to do is either take off that fiberglass and put on some new stuff, or I may just remodel this greenhouse altogether into the design that I showed you on the blackboard here a few minutes ago. What Bob the carpenter is kneeling on here is a walkway. I can walk up this beam and sweep off the greenhouse, because it's a fairly extensive greenhouse. It's at least 30 foot long. You see the gutter here which I catch the water. I have no water in this part of the land. And this is over 200 or 300 foot hill. And no way do you want to pack water over that baby. So I catch it in the gutters, and I run them off in hoses into the barrels on the inside, and I've got a couple of barrels out here now. When I have those 4 barrels inside filled, then I fill the 2 out there, and it usually gets me through a summer pretty good. And this was a little entrance way here. That's the original fire window in this house, in the $50 underground house, where the polyethylene is down there. That we turned that into the first lateral window well. That's behind the polyethylene. Where I'm standing now is on the roof of the original $50 underground house. In the background there is the roof of the palatial $500 addition. And if you look carefully, you can see where the uphill patio is up there. The first uphill patio. The Royer foyer on the palatial $500 underground house. Come on inside. Welcome to my home. The section you've seen over there panning through is part of the $500 section of the house. I'm sitting in the original $50 section of the house, although when it was the $50 section, this all was same level here as that level there. My bed's always been in the same area behind these boards. Take a look at that in a minute if you'd like. The electricity that you see here is provided by 2 solar panels, and they're stored in the batteries over there, 4 batteries, 4 heavy-duty RV batteries. Maybe it's not much, but hey, I don't have any mortgage. My taxes are low, and I like the simple life myself. So I have no apologies for living this way. It's suited me just fine for 21 years now. And my study area, where I write my letters, abusive letters to the editors and senators, pay my bills, and write my books. Rolling. This is called a latrine or an outhouse for city people who've never seen such a thing. There's 1 hole for big fellas and 1 hole for little fellers. May not look like much, but what the heck, it's home. Or at least it was home for a family of 3 for 18 months in this. This is not a true underground house. This is an earth-sheltered house. It's above ground, and we've bermed the earth around it, and of course the entire roof is earth. And in fact, let's take a look at the roof now. Sitting on the roof now. As you can see, we have a cedar forest growing on the roof. So far it hasn't leaked. People believe, scientists believe, that the roots won't push through the polyethylene because it senses that there's no water beneath. I've just walked down the roof of the crew house that we saw in the slideshow that we were building. And this is the shoring that goes around the outside of the gable. Now, why don't you come on over here and catch a look down and see what the gable looks like from up above. So this is the gable the main entrance into the house. And tell you what I think I'm going to do now. I think we're just going to give you a few silent shots, a few quick shots of the rest of the house. The parts that are open haven't got their window glass in yet. Everything that's open in this house will have window glass in it or a glass door. And you can see how light and airy an underground house can be. This is going to be my shelter. What you're coming through now will be a pantry, and then there will be, I don't know, a door, maybe a secret door off of that into the shelter. And this shelter is designed to take me through forest fire, fallout, whatever, when I get it done. No big deal. Since I got the excavation now, it'll take me, when I crank up on it with maybe one helper, it'll take me 2, at the most, 3 weeks to build a really fine shelter in this spot. You thought we'd never get to it. Here we are, the greenhouse we promised you. This is the hillside greenhouse. The one that's not doing so good. This fiberglass Phylon, very brittle. You can see it's dark. It's not clear at all anymore. And I think it's cutting out probably a good 80% of the sunshine. But we still get a few crops in there. We got a little Swiss chard going in there now that we'll show you in a second here. And this is how we catch our water in this gutter. Run it out in a hose down to a barrel down there. And we've got barrels inside where we catch it also. Standing on the platform now over the cold sink. Beneath here is where the cold air sinks down to inside the greenhouse. It doesn't lay into this growing area here. As I say, the greenhouse hasn't been doing well. We have got some Swiss chard that did pretty good this year up in the corner. We had some spinach on the upper tiers that did pretty good. This that I'm poking around here now is kale from last year. It went through the winter and has seeded on us. We're going to try to plant the seeds. We've got a little parsley behind the buckets over there that is still growing, but it's not growing well. This place used to be lush, used to be just full of greenery, and this is the place that took the tomatoes for year after year. Took the tomatoes into December, generally into the second week in December. Okay, this is the last structure we're going to show you on this tape. And this is kind of a survival house here because it has a greenhouse, the house, and a secret room, which we're going to show you on the inside. Okay, did you see the secret panel? We left it ajar. Give you a hint. There's another whole room in here. You're not going to be able to see it well because it's dark in there and we don't have any illumination in there. We don't have any illumination with us either. It's a panel that leads into a root cellar, which can also be used for a fallout shelter. With a little work, it'll make a fine fallout shelter. And people often ask us, how can they build a shelter which is disguised, which is hidden? And one of the ways of doing it is off of a building like this, or even on the back side of the greenhouse that we just saw. And the way to do that is you go between two posts. And if you want to, you can put shelves up here that you can slide out. You can put things in the shelves and really disguise it. But there we are. A secret room. It's one of the ways of hiding your shelter. Another way of hiding your shelter is by putting a pile of brush over the top of it, over the entrances. You shouldn't see the shelter itself if it's below the earth. You should have vegetation and so forth on top of it. But the entrances and the air vent is the problem. And you can, something like this will give you the main entrance, and then the air vent outside, you can put a pile of brush over it so that it's disguised. Well, we're coming to the end of this tape, and I could talk for hours on such subjects as how I'm almost certain that the way we're going to be in a war with China and North Korea and the Muslim countries versus the Western industrialized nations. But this is not the time or place for that. I just want to wish you well in the coming days, and I want to remind you, or I want to suggest to you that there are two ways to survive what's coming. One is to have yourself a good shelter, a greenhouse, hopefully an underground house also, a self-sufficient homestead. And what I haven't mentioned is the spiritual aspect. If you're not in spiritual harmony, I don't think you're going to make it through. And I'd like to put in a plug here for the Course in Miracles, which you can get from almost any bookstore. And I'm not going to tell you any more about it, except say that the Course in Miracles will definitely change your life if you take the course, if you study it. And it can do you nothing but good. And I wish you all the sincerest best wishes in the years to come.